Hi guys, so I'm just doing an interview with Lindsay from Life Warrior to do with the Divine Masculine Feminine Rising Summit that's coming up, and I'm just having a bit of a discussion with her about her views and experiences around this topic. So the first question that I have for Lindsay is going to be, what has been your most memorable experience with relationships?
Probably my current one, my marriage, which is quickly evolving. Well, we've really essentially evolved into, a conscious relationship that where we both have worked to balance our own divine masculine and feminine within ourselves, that within each other as well.
Oh, just saying that there's not a strong connection.
Yeah, mine said that too. Are we going to lose each other?
No, it'll be good. We're using our positive intention. Okay, cool. So on that topic, since you decided to talk about that, I want to know what you feel from your experience has been the positive influences that have affected you to have this sort of a relationship, particularly since from my perspective, some of the feelings that I'm going into are in, for me personally, not wanting to get married. So from your perspective as a like-minded spiritual being, I'm wanting to see where you've found that balance in, being married, and where you see the difference in between what you currently created and what you feel like the old paradigm way of being able to experience any form of intimate relationship is.
Okay. So, well, it's funny because I never wanted to be married either. I kind of, through my whole life, I was always like, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to get married. And I watched so many of my friends, rushing to get married. And it was like a race in our 20s where they were like almost in competition, who could get married first, who had the bigger wedding, and who was having kids first. And there was all this standing attached to everybody's status, and it was like almost like a status to people. And I was always like, well, I don't need all that, because I was very independent, and I didn't want to be accountable to anyone, and I wanted to just do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And as I sort of matured, and about 4 years ago, I started coming to a place where I was coming out of my own darkness in life. And I started getting very into, yoga and meditation and Buddhism and some of these older philosophies. And I started to essentially, emotionally grow up. And the more I realized that, first of all, that the world doesn't revolve around me as much as I want to think it does. It started to shift and change the relationships I had with people. And I was very much in a place of okay, I'm cool. For the first time in my life, I was perfectly fine by myself, because I had been doing so much inner work, and I was balanced, and I was happy, and I was content. And I was like, I don't even need anyone. I'm good here. And I was praying, and I would meditate. And when I would sit in meditation, my intention would be to receive the next sort of indicated step of my path. And sure enough, that week, I met my partner, my current husband, who was Chris, the other half of Life Warrior. And we started talking from across. I was in Australia, I was in California. And my first, in the beginning, this new approach that I had to relationships, where I was willing to, practice patience and really taking time, allowing myself to be a human and allowing the other person to be human, flaws and all. We started off a relationship very much like that, being very open and very, very in communication about all of our flaws and our issues and all those things. And the connection, we pretty well realized right from the get-go that we were definitely twin flame. We recognized each other, we knew each other, we saw that in each other. So of course, when we finally physically came together, it was already like, it was just, you could tell it was meant to be. But that's not to say that we haven't had our difficulties, because through our marriage now, we've been married like a year, and before that we were together for about a year. It's been like this, you know, just because we're a twin flame doesn't mean our very human emotional bullshit doesn't kick its head up, you know. And my masculine energy peaks and it goes out of control to the point where it's not balanced, and I become the like, okay, well, I don't need anybody and I'm gonna, you know, stuff my emotions and be alone. And sometimes his feminine energy will peak and it'll be like he's sensitive and I don't know how to deal with his sensitivity, and that's like one of the points where we'll have issues. So the key thing in our relationship has really been awareness of that, you know, recognizing that and admitting that. And when we're in the midst of that, those shit storms per se, really being able to take a step back and being like, okay, like one of our biggest tools is like, let's just remember that we love each other. Because in old relationships, and so many of the people that I'm seeing with failing relationships now, you know, all my friends and some family members who have been married for, you know, 5, 10, 15 years, and their relationships and their marriages are falling apart now. I firmly believe it's because neither of them is living in the present conscious moment with each other. You know, they're carrying stuff around from the past, or they're tripping on the future, or their own emotional stuff is getting in the way. And we all do it, right? Our emotional issues rise up and we project it onto whoever's around us. And it's your fault, because we don't stop and realize, like, hey, let me look at what's triggering me. And the big secret of our conscious relationship is that, knowing that and being able to stop and say, okay, I'm totally projecting my issue onto you right now. Or he'll be like, I'm totally projecting, you know, my trust issue onto you right now. And, you know, it gets interesting. But we're always able to come back from that, because we come back to the space that we love each other and that it's a divine connection. And there's a higher purpose for us. So we remember that. Did that answer your question? Because I don't know if I just went like that.
No, it totally did. And I really liked hearing that. The reason why I feel like this is so interesting talking to you is because I know that you felt similarly about marriage to me. And one of the concepts in the book that I'm going to be writing is to do with the vibrational frequency of words and how they can hold ancestral karma, and how they can be they can kind of contain something rather than having it infinitely expansive. So I was wanting something that I've always said, even when I decided not to get married, well, yet anyway, I decided I didn't want to when I really wanted to when I was growing up. Was that I felt like those that had marriages that lasted kind of let go of, somehow were able to let go of the karma and the yes. attachment to what the relationship as the marriage was supposed to be. And it was never about yes. the marriage. It was always about them holding on to the same core principles of each otherness, and then individuality, and the coming together and the sovereign beingness of each other. And that was what helped them to not necessarily be affected by the label. But what my question for you is, because I've recently had this where I got into a relationship and then immediately I changed. So it was good for me because of the growth, because it triggered things, but I hadn't been in a relationship for 4.5 years. And what I'd come to realize for me was that the title of the relationship had then lumped me into this box where all of these, what I felt was karma or ancestral things had come up for me to be able to have to resolve, which I've now decided I don't necessarily want to be in a relationship in that sort of framework to have to do that, because I feel like I've done it so many times before. So what's your take on whether or not it, like the term and the words, influenced you and how you felt in this connection and relationship?
It's so funny. Date people. I had this thing, like, I hated labels, right? So like 10 years ago, oh God, this was like back in my 20s. And this is quick, and then I'll get on to, like 10 years ago, I had a guy I was dating, and both of us were both like, okay, we don't like labels and we don't like this. And we actually called ourselves No Label because we simply did not want to attach. We didn't want to attach boyfriend, girlfriend, or relationship. So I was clinging onto this thing and blocking, you know, a lot of possible connections with people because I was so against the word. And what I've come to realize now with this, I love being married now. You know, I love saying that I'm a wife of my partner. It's still very new to me. And sometimes I hear myself say it and I'm like, I can't even believe that, like, I love this. But part of that is because I've redefined what that means. You know, part of the reason I didn't want to be a wife is because of a lot of that old stuff. And, you know, some of it is karmic. Some of it is ancestral. You know, there's a lot of different factors that come in and affect how we think about words, especially. Because words do have power, you know, they hold vibrational frequency and we carry them around with us. And I think oftentimes that's why words can trigger us so badly. And in a lot of the ancestral work I was doing around Halloween time, because it's like the best time of the year to do ancestral work, I was really tapping into a lot of the pain and suffering that's been passed down through my physical ancestors in this family. In my family line. And a lot of the healing that it is part of my purpose is healing a lot of this baggage and this karma that's been, you know, weighing everybody down for centuries on end. And I think a big part of that is through my relationship now, through my relationship with my husband and redefining, you know, what that means. What does it mean to be in a partnership and what is a marriage? And, you know, we really focus on marriage being a team and, you know, how team members support each other instead of that old dynamic of like, oh, well, I'm the husband and I'm the wife, you do this and you do this. And there's all these roles. And I think, you know, the best thing we can do for the planet as a whole is demonstrate that and embody that to other people, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really happy that you're doing that. See, for me, I'm like, I'm not opposed to partnerships and I'm not opposed to even ceremonies that is similar to what a marriage would be. For me, it's not even just the labels anymore. It's like, I don't know. I'm not wanting to, for me, I guess I just don't need it. It's the simple way. I feel like for me, I don't need it anymore for what I thought I wanted a marriage for or why I would get married.
Right.
I don't feel that I need anymore. So for me, I still want to have a ceremony with someone, but it's not around I am with you till we die. That for me, it's not I'm committing till I die to someone. It's more of I'm committing to celebrating and sharing my love with that person for however long what we're supposed to be together lasts for.
And I mean, there's huge growth in that. There's huge, to me, hearing you say that, like, because I think the same thing. It was exactly when I was like, I don't need any of those things. I don't need a relationship. I'm perfectly well on my own. That's when I eventually found my way into one. And the fact that it's not a need-based thing, exactly like you're saying, I think that really strengthens a relationship, you know. And we did a marriage, but it wasn't a traditional ceremony with traditional vows. You know, we wrote our own, and we believe that we're meant to be, you know, together for this physical existence as well as when we get to finally go beyond, you know, this realm. And but I think it's important to see those things and to know those things and to know that you no longer are looking for a relationship based on whatever that little picture of needs looks like, because we all go through it and we all have our own. That's empowering, you know, and that's when we like get to open ourselves up to a higher level relationship, I think.
Yeah. Well, for me, after my last relationship, which started off, and this is a funny thing, it was 6 weeks that felt like 6 years, and we were 100% twin flames. But then we were supposed to go on our separate journeys, and I didn't want to have the I guess it was the projection of other people's belief structures around what a relationship is, because I felt it. I'm quite sensitive, and I felt the energy and the compression of being in a box based on what other people believed a relationship was supposed to be. And he had been married. So he had done the marriage thing for 5 years and had been in the relationship for 8 years. And he didn't plan to get married again. And then for me, I was like, well, I wasn't wanting to put I wasn't wanting to put any necessary pressure on what things were going to happen. I just wanted to be in the now, and not to say that may not change in the future if I'm being more grounded, but I kind of feel like for me, it would definitely have to be a redefining. And I attempted to redefine what it was for us to be together, and asked if we could even potentially come up with a different name, like that we were partners, not that we were in a relationship. But after that, I decided what I'm looking for, what I'm seeking, if to be with another person, is what I'm wanting to call a sacred union, and also sacred sex. So something that, which I guess we can transition into the whole sex thing then. But
Sure.
I feel like it's a topic it's at the core root of a lot of what I feel is like the over aggressiveness and the imbalances that we see in the world at the moment. And for me, I was like, I went through an experience last year where I was sexually abused. And I know there's so much of this that people are like shocked at how much they're finding out about it. And it's been happening for a long time, but now people are actually talking about it. And it gives us the chance to kind of clear it out and, you know, find new ways to be able to connect and integrate and have wholeness within ourselves. So we're not having all of these shadows. So we're not acting in ways that are beyond our self-control because something's been suppressed until it explodes. And for me, I guess that just transitioned into me wanting to connect with someone in a way that was, you know, like learning about Tantra and getting into more alternative ways of consciously connecting with people, where it's not just for the physical sex, it's beyond that, and it's integrated. The sexual energy is integrated into every part of our life, and that's something that I felt thoroughly guided. So what's your experience and also perspective on like sacred sex and the way the world is with sex at the moment and the imbalance that this you feel potentially has created in the world?
I think exactly what you said is dead on. We've talked about that, and I think a big part of what we really need to heal as a whole has to do with just that. Because if we look at, you know, history for hundreds, if not thousands of years now, the feminine has been oppressed. You know, we've been put in a place where it's almost an object, especially sexually, you know, of masculine. And what that's done is it's just more and more and more over the years has gotten more and more unbalanced. So if we say like right here is balance of masculine and feminine, over the years, you know, the feminine has been pushed down and the masculine has risen up and up and up. But at this state, neither one of those is remaining, you know, divine. And it becomes this skewed version of what it's meant to be. And that's why we see like this aggression, especially towards women who all of a sudden want to rise up and hold their own, or this whole thing where we feel like we're sort of emotionally responsible for the well-being of men. And I'm using, you know, the terms men and women, and I'm not putting anybody in a box, and I'm not saying it's all men and it's not all women.
Meaning the feminine energy. Yeah. So like you mean like the feminine energy, because both men and women have feminine energy. So the feminine has also been suppressed in men.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's my disclaimer. Right. Okay. So it's like we take a man who naturally has the masculine and feminine in them, and the feminine is just suppressed because what has our society done? Our society has told men they can't be soft, they can't be sensitive, they better not cry, they have to be tough, and well, hell, if a woman doesn't give them what they want, just, you know, take it, and they can say what they want and they can do what they want. So it's just gotten more and more unbalanced within them. And what happens then within the females too, our masculine and feminine is, you know, sharply skewed as well. And it can go either way. You know, we have someone like me who my masculine kicks up, and I'm ultra like, you know, leave me alone, I'm independent and I'll fight you. And, you know, none of that protects me from anything. You know, I can still be, you know, taken advantage of and sexually assaulted, which I've been to. And, or you get the other way where a female the feminine will be so up here where they're just falling into this, like, I'm a doll and I'm plastic and I'm useless because everything is about my appearance and I don't need to have a brain, or I don't actually have to ever do anything for myself because a man's going to come along and do it. And either way we look at it, it's all just imbalance, and it all is adding to this
distorted.
Crazy thing that we're distorted.
Like distorted, yeah. And it's funny, like there's an article I was reading the other day that was actually saying along the lines of when there's such a distortion as a being, not just masculine or feminine, but as our views as a being, because we're separate. It becomes like this duality thing within ourselves.
Exactly.
It actually creates like there's certain things that from this perspective of divinity and sacredness and respect that has been so suppressed that there are things that are so normal even within relationships that are actually sexual abuse, that so many people in marriages and in relationships actually are sexually abusing one another because they don't have that level of respect and divine love for themselves. Therefore, they can't express it with another, that they want to have ownership and then impress what their desires and needs are onto the other person and not give respect of both oneness and also individuality to another sovereign being. What's your experience or perspective of that?
I think that's so true, because if we don't have that within ourselves, we can't bring that to our relationships, you know. And I think that's why we see such a high level of you know, people who cheat, or they're dishonest, or they have these really sort of perverse, you know, distorted sexual behaviors, because something within them is getting so suppressed that it's then coming out sideways in all of these harmful behaviors, because our culture doesn't want to seem to, you know, we're still very like Puritan from when, you know, they fled England and like, don't talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. And I think that, you know, that's very damaging. And it creates, like you said, it creates a lot of abuse in relationships that people don't even realize is sort of a form of sexual abuse, you know? Someone in a relationship feeling like they don't have say over what happens to their body is not a healthy thing, yet it's a very normal thing in relationships, you know? A wife that feels like, well, if she doesn't have sex with her husband, he's going to be mad or he's going to go cheat on her. That's not a healthy, you know, divine, sacred union between two people who love and respect and hold each other, you know, in sovereignty and divinity. That's a very distorted version of what a union should look like.
Yeah.
And I think that
I had like personal experience with my mum of that. And it's kind of a story that I want to share just in case there are people out there that feel that they're in that situation. And that's what this is a bit about as well, to have people come out and discuss so that they can feel empowered to change it. So my mum ended up finally leaving my dad with 6 kids. She was pregnant with 1. And she is an amazing role model, was a very powerful woman, same star sign as you, you know, that I feel that you're very similar to her, which is probably why this came up too. But from when I was a little girl, since she left my dad, it was always about this, you know, they were both raised as Catholics. And even within this whole religious thing, and it's not to say anything negative about religion, but just how everything that's become so distorted and suppressed and the damage that it's had in the world. My mum was told that if she didn't have sex with my dad when he wanted it, and that if he masturbated, it was her sin. He would guilt trip into her. And this is why she ended up having so many kids in such a short period of time, that she was not pregnant. She was either pregnant or breastfeeding, pregnant or breastfeeding, pregnant or breastfeeding, because all of us were 2 years apart for 5 out of 6 of her kids. She was just like a baby breeding machine without getting any emotional support and with getting very minimal financial support, and then ended up leaving pregnant with 5 kids, having to then be the man and attempting to be the mum at the same time. And this is something that I feel is really common. And it's kind of like, then when for being the child from that, even though I've taken responsibility that I've chosen this, I chose that life for the lessons that it taught me. For other people as well who have had that experience, my mum never had the time to get to know me as a person. She had too many kids. She had too much stuff on her plate as a single parent. She never had the chance to spend enough one-on-one time with each of us to have the relationship that she wanted. That her whole life, she felt guilty that she wasn't a good enough mother, all because she couldn't step into her sovereign power and say, well, hey, no, that's not true. Because of what she was taught from society was the way that marriages were supposed to be, and how religion was supposed to be, and how she was supposed to be a good person.
That's right. That's the perfect story to illustrate what we're talking about. Because there's all these like dogmatic beliefs that they're like programmed into us for like hundreds of years. And like shaking that is it's a big thing, sort of rewiring those and those belief systems within us. You know, it's real. And it's like, that's hearing something like that is exactly the reason why growing up I was kind of like, well, that's why I didn't want to be married. Because, you know, I'll be damned if I'm going to be put in that box of like, oh, you think you own me. And, you know, even now in a very conscious and respectful and, you know, sacred relationship, sometimes the old beliefs will come up. You know, and we're very like, if we're very, we communicate openly about our sex life, and we're very much on the same page when it comes to if both of us don't want to have the union, we're not going to do it. You know, it's there is no like, oh, well, I'm just going to do this to please you because I feel like I'm supposed to because I'm your wife. Because we're aware and we're willing to talk about that stuff. But it's unfortunate that it's so prevalent that people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to talk about when there's problems in their sex life. They don't want to talk about if their partner is doing something weird. They don't want to talk about anything that fits in that category of darkness. You know, they just want to hide it under the rug, and that's what it keeps building and building and building and distorting and creating a bigger sort of ravine between
duality.
The two sides of the duality. Yeah. And then whatever side of the duality somebody's on, it's like, oh, that, and pointing back and forth. And it's like just the repetitive cycle.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's really interesting because I'm really like happy that I've been able to have so many different sorts of experiences with relationships, different sorts of people, and then different ways of having a relationship. And I think it's also the fact that I changed so much as a person. And I know that there are a lot of people throughout, you know, same age group as me, where there's been so many like changes of cycles in history, even like in the year that we're living this life now, like even now from like 5 years ago, it's like we're going through these massive cycles rather than being dragged out over hundreds of years. They're like coming together in like a 5-10 year cycle where it's like shifting and changing, where I was changing and then I was having a different sort of relationship, and it was like they all reflect us. So for me, I found that every time I was in a relationship, whether it be sexual, whether it be friendship, even especially if it was with the opposite sex, I kind of just stopped and went, okay, I'm observing this person, and how are they reflecting that in myself? How are they reflecting my feminine? How are they reflecting my masculine? How is this something I've been suppressing? How is this something I haven't been able to see that I've guided them into my life or requested them into my life to be able to understand on a deeper level, to create healing, to be able to help be an example, and to allow others to be a person to offer approval and acceptance for people to speak about this, for people to have healing, for people to be more authentic, for people to speak up and want what they deserve, something that's more divine. And I feel like as a girl to girl, I don't know what all your sexual experiences were like before, but until I'd started on this journey of seeking something higher and finding tantra and yoga and different things, I always felt in sex that there was supposed to be something more. Didn't matter whether I had a great orgasm or not. It was always supposed to be something more on a connected level than just this physical interaction that sometimes I just felt like I was a robot. So what's your experience?
Absolutely. You know, in my 20s, I spent my time, running. I was running away from, it was funny. I was doing the whole, I'm seeking connection, but I don't know that I'm seeking connection. So anytime something got a little too close, I ran away. And, you know, a big part of that, pre-healing a lot of my issues, especially around men and sex and emotional vulnerability, because all of those things, go together when we want to talk about opposite sex or same sex, if that's what you're into, whatever. When you want to talk about the vulnerability of sex, it's funny, in my 20s, I used to be like, oh, no, I approach sex like a man and I don't care. And there's no emotional attachment. And as I've gotten really deep in there and done a lot of my healing work around this, I have found that there was indeed emotional attachment. I just was suppressing it so well that I didn't feel it. And then I eventually, had to drag it all out and clean it all up and, heal around it. And it's funny because it was always these, I would approach sexual unions as like, okay, I want this, and I was looking for something out of it, and I would always come out of it disappointed. Like you said, whether I had the orgasm or not, I was always disappointed. And I was very much like the one, okay, well, we had sex, so now I don't need to have anything to do with you because that's all well and good. Thank you. You served your purpose and goodbye. And now when I look in hindsight, it's just, it's so funny. And, it's all the path, and I needed all of those experiences to get me exactly where I am today. But when I compare it to now and how it feels when we connect on a sexual level, I understand what that was, that on some level, even back then at my earliest ages, I understood that there was some deeper energetic connection that was meant to be happening. And the other thing we need to remember is whether we're conscious of it or we're not, and this is what I think we really need to teach our children growing up as they come into the age of getting into that, and our younger generations, that whether we're conscious of it or not, or on a conscious level or not, sex is still an energetic union. And there's still a very much an energy exchange that occurs with anyone we allow into our space like that. And in that exchange of energy, we're leaving a piece of ourselves and they're giving us a piece of themselves. And, sometimes way later down the road, we have to then go in and do a lot of healing around that. And it's, nobody teaches us that in junior high sex ed. So now when Chris and I are together, it's a completely different, connection on all levels, physical, mental, and energetically spiritual. And it's, I get it. I can't really describe it, but now I get it.
That's so funny, because for me it was the opposite in contrast. I waited till I was 18 and I wanted to wait till I was married to have sex, because that's what was programmed into me, and I wanted to be a good little girl. So for me it was like, then when I finally lost my virginity, it was with someone I thought I would get married to, and then realized that I just got sucked into falling in love based on lust, because I forced myself to be in a relationship with this person to get over someone else I was in love with, and they were the only guy I trusted. So I got to the point where I'd never been in a long enough relationship sexually with somebody that I trusted to even consider anything else happening. So when I was like in my, late teens, I didn't kiss anyone till I was 17. So I was like 17 to 18, was actively kissing people, and then eventually ended up in a relationship where I had sex. And then for the next 2 years, I actually had to find elsewhere to have sex, because me and my boyfriend at the time weren't allowed to sleep at each other's places because our parents were religious. So we actually had to go and have sex in a car and outdoors. And that was very degrading for me. And also the fact that I just thought, well, that was what we had to do if we wanted to become intimate and grow our relationship. And because of all of the suppression, it had created all of these dramas. And then even after we broke up, we still continued having sex. because neither of us were connected to someone else, and we weren't balanced in all of the connection and all of the control of the energy that was happening. So we created this whole negative dynamic where we just went to the other one to have sex until we met other people. And then I helped him to move on with someone else, and then I got even thrown out of his life. So this created a multitude of other things to do with me having like separation anxiety, and then having this idea that I was going to be abandoned. So it brought up all these abandonment issues around sex as well, that when I finally got into another relationship about 8 months later, which became a 5-year relationship, when he told me he loved me because of all of the suppressed stuff from the previous trauma that I'd been through, which seems normal. It's normal, but it's actually not healthy. I cried for 2 hours when I was told that I was loved. I literally, just to be told by someone else I was loved, I could not talk, and I was sobbing for 2 hours. And it took me a whole week to say it back to him, even though I felt it, because I was so scared of being abandoned. Do you?
Yeah. Fear is real, and abandonment issues are real. Like, and that is a big thing, especially I think for women. You know, so many of us, it's like we're almost born with the abandonment issues because, you know, we have issues around our fathers, because our fathers come from a completely different generation where there's just not this emotional communication and this emotional nurturing. And again, another place I've had to do massive amounts of healing work, you know, because when you're a child, you can't understand that your parent is doing the best that they can at that given moment. You know, you're just understanding like what you're not getting, and you're transmuting that into like this issue that you then grow up and carry around with. And as I look back now, and I look back at the dynamics of my early relationships, I see how,
wait a second, it's cutting out.
I set it up over and over again. Leave me if I cared about them.
Wait a sec. I'm just going to get you. I can't even see you now. Well.
Oh, yeah. So I was saying, when I look back at the dynamic of my earlier relationships, I would go into these relationships thinking that like, yes, I want to be in this relationship and I care about this person, but I would have the walls up. I would have massive brick walls up because I was so afraid to be vulnerable, because I had a giant abandonment issue, because my father was present, but he wasn't emotionally present because he didn't know how to be. And when I look back now in hindsight, it's so clear how I created exactly the pattern over and over again, where I would draw people in, and as soon as they were like, oh, I love you, I'd be like, oh my God, you're a clinger, you gotta go. And I would run in the other direction because it was just completely frightening to me that someone loved me. I was like, oh, no. Or on the other hand, I would chase after these emotionally unavailable partners who I would be like, oh God, look how horrible they are to me. You know, they don't want to be with me, and I'm so in love with them. And so, but then when somebody did want to be emotionally available to me, I ran away, and and it was all because I had this big unhealed, you know, abandonment issue. And of course that translated into my sexual behavior and my behavior in all my relationships, even just my friendships. You know, I wouldn't let anybody in, and I wouldn't get vulnerable because the fear was controlling me.
Yeah, and I was very much like that. That's why I think I remained in a 5-year relationship, because I was afraid of being alone. And the day that I realized that was the day that I actually ended it, because it had become so unhealthy and so abusive, where I wanted to grow and he wanted to stay stuck where he was, and I didn't want to leave him behind. And I realized that it wasn't fair on either of us to be in that relationship any longer, because we weren't together for the right reasons anymore. And I even knew that from the beginning before. And I let us get into that relationship where there was no communication. He wouldn't address his emotional issues. Every time I wanted to discuss the relationship, it would be painful for him. And then he'd like dump that on me. It would be like I was causing shit just because I wanted to. And I was like, and now you're like pinning me as the typical bitchy, naggy type of a girl. And I'm like, I'm not even like that. If you want to go to a strip club for a bucks night, I don't even care. If you want to talk to another girl, I don't even care. I even asked if we can talk about your fantasies in the bedroom so that we can have this, you know, kind of expansive growth relationship where we don't pin the other one down. And he wasn't like open to that, but at the same time, he just didn't want to face any of his shadows. He didn't want to look at anything. He wanted to pretend it wasn't working. I mean, like it wasn't affecting the relationship. Everything that made him suffer in his life, that was him as a person out of the relationship, he didn't think it affected the relationship at all, even though it was him and he was in the relationship. What's your experience with that type of a thing?
Yeah, I'm very much the I would have been the one in the past who, especially in my 20s, like, oh, I want to talk about this, and I just wasn't open to hearing about that. And it's funny because now when I look back on them, I can see all the mirroring that was occurring, and I can see how things were being brought up as a mirror to me. I just wasn't ready to see it at the time. And I was very much the one, like, I'm just going to make this your fault. And as soon as that would happen, I would just check out of the relationship, you know, emotionally. And I might still physically be in the relationship, but at that point, it was like the wall was up, and whatever you did over there wasn't fazing me. And I was over here doing what I wanted to do. And, you know, eventually after I got sick of it enough, I would physically end it and leave, or, you know, just be so awful that they would end it with me. And again, I would spend some time alone, and I would sit in that, and I would sulk, and then I'd be like, okay, maybe I'll go have a relationship, which usually would stem out of just hooking up. You know, there was never actually like taking time to get to know anybody. And the same cycle would happen over and over again. Someone would try to talk about something on a deeper emotional level, and I'd be like, no, we're not doing that. Okay, it's time to check out. You want to get too deep? I gotta go. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is quite interesting, because now I'm like at the other end where I started to realize where they were reflecting me, where on the surface I thought that I was being, you know, the deep and the doing all the inner work, but then underneath I was just as afraid running away from what they were running away from. But I had different ways of addressing it and attempting to suppress it than what they were. So for me, what I discovered was that it was a part of me that I had become so unaware and unconscious of that I couldn't even see the way it was playing out for me. I was only seeing how it was playing out as a mirror from their side, because I had shut off. I would shut off and I would close off when it was suitable for me. It's just when they did, it wasn't suitable for me. And then the more I opened up, the more I could see with other people how there was still this part of me I was just unconsciously aware was tuning out and not being emotionally open, in the sense I wasn't letting myself be vulnerable. I was just being like, I'm okay. If anything happens, I'll be fine. It doesn't matter if we break up. We just need to put all of this logical stuff in place to make things work easier. And that was kind of the mentality I had. They were reacting in a different way and closing off in a different way. And I didn't see myself as closing off until much later, when I started to become more conscious aware of these shadows.
It's so true. We're masters of manipulating ourselves, you know, and just seeing in the other person. And that's been a big theme in our relationship now, is because gosh, you know, we've both done immense amounts of work, and we're both very aware of a lot of our human issues that get in the way. And we still, like, there's times where we'll start, and maybe he'll say something to me and be like, well, I feel like you're being this way, and I feel like you're a little bit distant right now. And I'll have to kind of suss for a moment and look, like, before I would immediately be like, no, I'm not being distant. It's you. And now I'll sort of pause, and I'll take a look at it. Am I being distant? Because just like you just said, I'm well aware that I can slip into distancing and putting up a wall without even realize what I'm doing. you know, because being as sensitive and empathic as I am, sometimes my walls start to go up without me even realizing it, because everything around gets too much, and I withdraw a little bit, because that's what I do to protect myself. And a really big learning curve in my current marriage is that we've learned to, when this is occurring and mirrors are happening, and we've learned to stop and not take things personally. And we've really learned to talk through those moments. So if he says to me, oh, I feel like you're being a little bit distant, and I've stopped and I've really looked within and checked, like, am I withdrawing or am I not? And then I say, okay, not this time, I'm not withdrawing. I was like, and then we'll say, are you projecting? And then sometimes he'll get into his own stuff and take that examination, and he'll see, oh shit, there goes my little mechanism kicking back up. Because we've done that quite a few times with each other, where we're accusing the other one of shutting down, and then we find out it's just our old stuff kicking up. And now it's almost funny when it happens, because we're that comfortable with it. But if that's what comes of, you know, just admitting and accepting and talking through the shit, you get a better connection with the people around you. Mm. When we talk about the very things that we're like, oh my God, I can't admit that I did that. Like, you know, we find the most connection over those things, because we're all ridiculous and we're all human. Like,
yeah, someone was saying to me the other day that we need to accept that we're all hypocrites and that we're all parasites. And I think it was Bob Marley that said that. And if we can accept that, then we can all accept each other as hypocrites and parasites, right, and not feel so personally attacked. It's really funny what you were talking about as well. Like, I think what you were discussing, the topic of the whole, like, I call it our shadow, something we're unconscious of or something that we're afraid and we don't want to accept about ourselves is the shadow. And as soon as we suppress this, we put it into our unconscious mind and we're no longer consciously aware. So we, for example, we could be doing something and people would tell us and we'd be like, no, we're totally not doing that. Unless we go inside and explore this shadow, we would be totally ignorant of the facts that we were doing it, even if, even if we really were, until we started to become more consciously accepting and aware of this part of ourselves to transmute and to be able to change. And then this leads me into the whole communication thing, as well as shadows and how we affect each other as beings. Because a lot of what's been coming up recently, as I was chatting to you earlier before this interview about me working with the dolphins and doing some telepathic work, you start to understand where we're all telepathically communicating, whether the other person's consciously aware of them receiving it or not. And if we're not consciously aware of what we're telepathically communicating to the other person simply by thinking, they could telepathically be receiving something negative we thought about them or judgment, and they could switch off but not even know why they're switching off or that they switched off as a protection. Or you could have thought you wanted some space at some point and telepathically they got it. But A, you didn't know you were telepathically communicating. And B, they weren't consciously aware of what you were telepathically communicating. Their body just naturally responded. And it's like about understanding everything we're doing consciously is affecting everything and we're all connected, and being able to go, how am I using my thoughts? How am I using my energy? How am I using my words? For me and for the other people who are around me, all the other people that I'm thinking of, because they're going to be receiving it. We're all interconnected with all of these different streams of chords everywhere. And that's something else.
It's so true. It's like, it's really, so, and a lot of the shadow stuff. So we started a new blog, right? If you've read it yet, Hug Your Chaos. Okay. Because it's all about that darkness and that shadow, and the fact that as a whole, we love to refuse to acknowledge those shadow aspects, those dark aspects of ourselves. So our whole new blog is about integrating the light and the dark, coming to a place where you acknowledge those things. So exactly that doesn't happen, because that's what we're seeing, like an overall picture right now in society is like, people's shadows are running amok. And then when you try to point it out to them, they're like, oh, hell no. Oh, how? And then they turn around and they attack you for it. And the only way we're ever going to, transcend this is by doing the work within ourselves, exactly like what we're talking about. And it's funny because in our relationship now, the last year has been a big shadow work year for both of us. We've really gotten in there, and we've really gotten into those dark places and looked at our shitty behaviors and, you know, the crappy things we do and how we act when we're mad or scared. And because we've done that in a mindful, conscious state, we're really able to greet those places, you know, through journey, especially. Like shamanic journeying is such a crucial aspect to getting back into those places and healing them with love. And when we heal them with love, we can then sort of have a whole new approach to it. Like, yep, there goes that shadow. And, you know, not to like put off responsibility for it, still taking ownership over our behavior, but also in the way that like we know it's okay. And that doesn't have to define us. And then I loved what you were saying about the thoughts and the connection, because as you were talking about that, I couldn't help but think, I had the thought that was like, you see, there's so much happening in any given moment. It baffles me that we can waste our time in the future and in the past, because in any given moment, what I'm thinking, doing, and saying is affecting, you know, everyone around me. And what everyone else is thinking, doing, and saying is getting transmitted to me. And like I said, I'm high sensitive, very intuitive. Sometimes I scare myself and I think I'm almost borderline psychic, not psychic.
I don't know, there's a fine line. There's a fine line between the both of those two things.
It's like I will literally like read people's thoughts sometimes, and then they'll say it and I'll be like, oh my God, like that was weird, because I totally just, it's like I read it in their mind before they actually said it. And in our relationship, when we are both very, very clear and grounded, it's like that. We don't have to talk much. You know, somebody has a thought and the other one responds. It's very, very interesting. And it's so different than we're programmed to be in the human existence, because we're all so used to being, you know, blockaded and weighed down by all the noise. Yeah.
A dense robot.
Yeah. And when we stop and we get clear, we realize how much we can really connect with people. And, you know, we call them synchronicities, but that's the way we're meant to be functioning.
Yeah. Everything is a synchronicity. I feel like recently I realized everything is a synchronicity. We're just sometimes not consciously aware enough of every single synchronicity that's occurring, because everything is synchronistically happening in divine order and plan. And it was interesting what you were talking about. One thing that's really funny about mirroring, as your dog was walking behind your back, you can't see it because it's not my back, it's the opposite way, flipping the mirror. There was a cat I'm upstairs from stairs, and there was like a patio, and there was a cat walking in the same place where your dog was walking behind the laptop. It's like so cool. It's like the flip, because it wasn't behind me, it was the other side. But no, the thing you were talking about, and I think this is a good transition, because I think you're a really good person to have this topic, because you've had multiple experiences and because you've done the journeying and you do a lot of yoga. I was wanting to get on the topic with you about like Tantra and spiritual sex, where this is very linked to what you were just talking about, the telepathic communication, because that is a big part of Tantra, where even before you physically touch the other person, you're communicating and you're using your energy bodies to connect in a way that you're affecting one another and creating this positive, balanced cycle and flow in both yoga and in like tantric work, tantric breath work. You're synchronizing, and then the physical comes into it, where you're like balancing all of your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual. So I was just wanting to get your kind of take and whatever you can share it from your experience, because for me, this is something that's new, and I know that it's not something that's as common, that needs to be more common in the way that we connect with people in a sacred union.
Sure. You know, there's a reason, like, especially Tantra yoga and Kundalini yoga, they are two of the most intense yoga practices that there are. And, you know, there's like a whole thing where they will sit with another person in meditation, but sit, and it's just, It is direct breathing and eye contact. And
so like soul gazing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. While you're breathing and you're doing that breath work, which is now moving around, you know, crazy issues and blocked energy. So stuff's coming up and you're sitting there and, you know, you're linked eyes with somebody, and it's a very, very intense thing. And if we kind of look at how we are in society now, it is really hard to get someone to look you in the eyes and hold that gaze. There are not a lot of people, because we all know it. Eyes are the windows to the soul, right?
Mm.
And I even catch myself with my husband sometimes when we lock eyes, my programming, that little voice that I still carry around from being a child, it's like,
look away.
No, look away. You're vulnerable right now, you know, because something about staring someone in the eye is very vulnerable. And, you know, one of the practices I did early on in my spiritual journey was gazing at myself in the mirror, locking eyes with myself and holding that until, and emotions would come up and it got real vulnerable. And it was very, very healing to do that. And I think that that's actually a really great practice and I had the thought that Chris and I hadn't actually sat down and done work like that, where we've sat and done the soul gazing and done breath work together. And I really think we're going to try that this weekend.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, particularly. It's not funny at all. It's like perfectly divine, that everything that flows as the reflection of each other and that we're all connected as God in oneness comes up, which is why we're talking about this stuff, to get higher understanding and to share and find more solutions and unity between things. So I started that on one of my spiritual journeys, where I dedicated myself to radical self-love. And the beginning, funnily enough, was to do with the Louise Hay book. And I actually had the tablet sitting on a Louise Hay book called Inner Wisdom. And I'd flipped to a page earlier when I was asking about how to connect with the dolphins on a deeper level in preparation for seeing them. And as I pulled the book out, the first page that came up is, all of my relationships are enveloped in a circle of love. I envelop my fellow human beings in a circle of love, whether they are living or not. I include my friends, my family, my loved ones, my spouse, everyone from my work and my past, and all the people that I would like to forgive and don't know how. I affirm that I have wonderful, harmonious relationships with everyone, where there is a mutual respect and caring on both sides. I know that I can live with dignity, peace, and joy. I let this circle of love envelop the entire planet, and I let my heart open so I can have a space within me filled with unconditional love. I am worth loving. I am beautiful. I am powerful. I open myself to all good. So just to prove synchronicity, that what we were talking about, that's the page that it flipped to. And I was reading a Louise Hay book, which you've probably heard, which is You Can Heal Yourself or something like that. And it was talking, and I was at the time working at the body shop, and I was dealing with a lot of my stuff because they were big on personal development. So every other day in between working full time, I was doing personal development with books, and it became my addiction. And this book said in the book to look yourself in the eyes and tell yourself you love yourself. And that was like a cataclysmic moment. In my workshops, I talk about this moment where I looked myself in the eyes in the mirror, and I thought, because I had been consciously attempting to accept myself for some time to heal, I was like, I love myself. This will be easy. As soon as I looked myself in the eye and said, I love you, like the time with the boyfriend I was talking about, bawling, healing. And then my higher self took over and said something to me. And it was like every single thing I'd ever wanted another person to say to me to heal. I was talking to myself, but it was not me talking to myself. It was someone else talking through me to myself. And the only other times I'd experienced that, which is linked to how I do automatic writing with a lot of my psychic work, I channel a lot through writing. Even in my youth, when I felt like I was crying and I wanted to hurt myself, twice I had attempted my life to, what I feel was to discover the deep meaning why people want to end their life and to be able to do work. And we've done a lot of work to do with these things with the Free Hugs for Awareness and even Life Warrior. And for me, what I kind of like realized was when I was a child, I'd write myself letters instead of looking at myself in the eye. If I didn't hear what I felt I needed to hear from someone else, I would write myself a letter and I would channel my higher self into this letter to be able to say to me and know that I could go to this letter and go to my higher self or to God whenever I needed to hear something from someone, no matter what was happening, and it would calm me and I would feel this space of love within myself. And the soul gazing kind of took that to a whole nother level. And then every other relationship I had after that point, because this was after my 5-year relationship, and I decided I was going to go 12 months without any form of relationships, and I was going to do the inner work and find out why I was happy to be in a 5-year relationship that I knew wasn't serving either of us, and why I was so scared of being alone. And then every relationship I had, I would do soul gazing. And then I went to this spiritual retreat a few years ago where we had to do soul gazing with people. And first we had to send love, which most people find easy. And then as soon as we received love, people would struggle. Locking eyes and receiving love. And I started crying. And for me, crying in front of other people is a huge deal. I don't know whether it's something for you as well, that I feel like that's the masculine and feminine again, where I felt I couldn't be, like I've always been prominently like masculine, even though I've been that sensitive person that I'd suppressed because of the society that I was in. I just became really masculine. I became tough. I became shielded. I became, didn't matter what anyone did. It didn't hurt me. It didn't affect me, was what I was telling myself, so that I wouldn't cry, so that I wouldn't be vulnerable. And also it blocked me from being able to tap into my intuition and to be able to heal and release. So I guess I just spoke about a multitude of things, but like, what's your kind of experience been when you've had to do that? And also potentially Louise Hay.
Right. No, it's so, because when you were talking about when you would write that stuff to yourself, that's a really powerful tool that I never had growing up. And I think had I realized that earlier on, I probably would have lived a different path. But again, that's all. It is what it is. I had to walk what I had to walk to learn the lessons I learned. But now I fully realize that those things that I seek, when I'm seeking to hear something from someone else, I can get exactly that from within me and from above and from God and source, whoever.
Yeah.
And coming to that realization was probably one of the most empowering moments during my path, because that had been a big driver of a lot of my issues, was that I was never being told enough, oh, I love you. Oh, you're good enough. Oh, whatever it is, all these things. And I had all these issues around it. And when I stopped needing to hear it from others, it was because it was finally getting through from above. And I think the same, like you said, there was plenty of times when I was in a real, desperate, bad off state, walking on the real edge of the darkness and on the edge of life, where there was this outside communication coming in. I mean, it was me, but like you said, higher self, where, I just wanted to give up, and some voice was coming from somewhere telling me like, no, we got this and we can get through this. And whatever it is, you're good enough and you're worth more, and, let's change it. And then, things start to shift. And so when I really started getting real deep into the work, I got more in tune with that voice. And it's really something now that it's like, okay, most of the time, probably like 98% of the time, I don't fall into looking for, the affirmation from outside. I do it to myself. That's why I'm a firm believer in those affirmations. I'm a firm believer of looking at yourself in the mirror and practicing affirmations, whether you use something from a book or, I love writing articles about this because I love making up really, really funny, almost humorous ones, because I think when we can bring laughter and humor into it, that also brings a lot of healing. And we stop taking ourselves so seriously, which also helps us heal.
Yeah, I totally agree that. And it's interesting. It's funny because that's without even talking about Louise Hay, like that's like her thing. The affirmations, every single book she writes, it's all about the affirmations. And it's just so interesting how everything like flows connective wise. The other thing that I was wanting to discuss before we get off, because we're like kind of going over time a bit, and I think I can only have a YouTube video for like an hour, is
we get going.
How it's all connected, because when we have this unconditional love, our inner masculine and feminine can like kind of come together, and we can have that balance. And what you were saying about the writing and the affirmations and not needing it outside of you, something that came to me was, as soon as you change it and you give it to yourself, you give others permission to give it to you. Because even though we're wanting it, we're all very, like, we struggle to receive, because the receive is the feminine. Yeah. So it's like, even though we want it, we have these blind spots that are blocking us from receiving affirmations, more money, more respect, more time, especially as women, because our programming says, well, you're not supposed to have that. You're not worthy of that. That's not how the world works. When in reality, we're recreating the fact that, well, that's a load of shit, and that's an illusion, because as a matter of fact, our birthright is unconditional love. And our birthright is, and the other thing that I was wanting to share with you and discuss briefly before we leave is, this is where the whole marriage thing comes down to for me. And I guess when you what would be called in NLP terms, when you reframe something in your own mind and you cut your cords from anything ancestral, or you change the meaning of the word in your reality. So you're like, you take out one holographic imprint of what something means, and you create a new holographic imprint that you put into yourself in your reality. For me, marriage, the previous construct of marriage, it's not about unconditional love. Even in our youth, and like you were talking about, our parents do their best, and in our youth, we don't necessarily understand that yet. Mm-hmm. But we're so close to source that what we've been getting before we incarnate is unconditional love, that when we're met with less than unconditional love, we're all like, all of a sudden, like, oh my God, we're not worthy.
We're traumatized.
What is wrong in this world? Why is there not unconditional love happening to me?
Why did I come here?
Yeah, why am I here? What's going on? And then we become programmed that that's how you love in this reality, that love is conditional. It's this conditional thing. So we're constantly giving ourselves conditioned love, and then we're giving everyone else conditioned love.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like where we exactly that, because where else does this idea come from? You know, except that before we incarnate and we come here, we're in this place and this bubble and this thing of unconditional love where we are what we are and we're connected to source. And then all of a sudden we come into this harsh human world and everybody's got issues and trauma and baggage, and there's no more unconditional love. And oh my God, I'm so sensitive and I'm feeling all your stuff, and now I'm carrying around your stuff and my stuff, and we're still seeking that unconditional love. But then when somebody tries to give it to us, we're because of all of our stuff that we're holding on to, we block it, because we're like, well, no. That human side of us is like, well, no, I don't know what to do with that. I can't, what do I do with that? And then that higher self that's so connected with source is like, oh, but we want that unconditional love. So it's this constant thing, like, okay,
the duality again. It's the duality again.
It always comes down to that.
And that's why I feel that like spirit directly, when I was having a conversation, guided me to do the summit, that all these interviews I'm doing is like an intro, so people can get a taste of what the summit's about, and also like the types of speakers, because I know you're going to be one of the speakers that's going to be on the summit, and it'll be really interesting to hear like more about your wisdom and more about the work that you do and your experiences in like less of this conversation and more of a structure of, this is all of the key pinnacle things and this is all of the key pinnacle experiences, so people can get it on a much broader scale, where I can feel that people are going to benefit already from just these casual chats discussing things we haven't been allowed to discuss, and then shedding light on all our shadow, like the collective shadow. We're shedding light on it and being like, as conscious beings, we love our shadow, we love your shadow, we love all the shadows, and then it's going to be able to we're hugging the chaos. I love that. And I feel like that's like a perfect way to end. But yeah, so you're definitely going to be on the summit that's coming up in April, and there will be dates that are going to get put on this video, and I'm going to have links to like your website and you and Chris.
Yeah,
and
I'll
what's
send you
happening with
everything. Yeah.
so people can get in touch, and also so people can look into the website about the summit, and if they're interested in signing up for the summit as well. So that one's the Divine Masculine and Feminine Rising Summit, and the
Awesome.
details will be on this video. But yeah, if there's anything else that you're wanting to share before we say ciao to everyone, that's okay as well.
No, I got to run actually, because yeah, we did go over, but no, it's just so enjoyable talking. It's been awesome.
Yes, that's cool. Okay. Thanks everybody for watching. See you later.